Well, out with the old Stagg Junior, in with the new Stagg Batch 22A. Let's talk about that today on the My Bourbon Journey Whiskey Review channel. Let's do this.
Purple skies at night always give a sign. Hair like fire, you set it on the flames, yeah. You just burning it all down.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. Greatly appreciate it. So really excited, again, like I mentioned on the intro, Stagg Junior out, now in with the newest kind of releases from Stagg. This is batch 22A. So the 22A being released after 22B, which makes a lot of sense. But we'll kind of dive into a little bit about the specs, what 22A kind of has to offer. Haven't had a chance to try 22B yet. So today we're just going to be talking specifically about batch 22A. So really excited after kind of sitting down with it a little bit. So what exactly does Stagg batch 22A have to offer? So batch 22A is coming in at 132.2 proof. It is mash bill number one, technically considered their low rye mash bill. It is non-age stated, but rumored to be approximately 8 years old. And MSRP, is roughly $70. But again, this has become one of those releases that if for some reason you're able to find it at MSRP, great. But most people unfortunately have to go to secondary markets to really find these newest batches. It's kind of unfortunate because it is always a great pour. They all vary in terms of different profiles. But again, it's always something I think that everyone looks forward to trying, getting their hands on. But anyway, let's go ahead and kind of dive into the review. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one real quick. I have to say a big thank you to my buddy Ted Tronson for supplying me with the sample for me to do a review of. Wasn't able to get, unfortunately, my hands on a bottle, but the sample will have to do. So Ted, thank you very much. So color-wise, as you can see, and again, beautiful oils already on the glass. It is running pretty thick on there. Beautiful, deep, rich copper, mahogany type of color. Very typical of what it is that the Stagg looks like. So let's go ahead and dive into this one. Boy, so immediately you are getting a little bit of that heat right off of the glass. So you do have to be a little bit careful with that right away. But immediately for me is this rich cherry like pipe tobacco. I'll even go as far as saying like a really rich cherry pie. And it also smells like maybe the best rick house you've ever been. So if you've had the pleasure of being inside of a rick house and what those smell like, maybe even on a very hot day, it gets very, very rich in aroma. This is very much that. Deep, rich brown sugars. Again, heavy kind of dark fruits. Again, like I mentioned before, cherry, but a lot of just those dark, rich, heavy fruits. Maybe even I'll say like a chocolate, maybe even a chocolate covered raisin. This one for me is slightly interesting. It's so rich, it's so intense that I'm almost getting this slight rum profile on it. It's maybe those deep brown sugars, that rich molasses. But again, it's that kind of really rum aspect that I'm picking up. Now I'm starting to kind of focus or pick up a little bit more of the oak, the baking spice on this. Maybe even a freshly buttered cornbread. There's something about it that I'm picking up this kind of really fresh buttered cornbread note. As far as wood goes, in addition to the oak, maybe even a slight cedar. And sometimes when I pick up cedar, it's this kind of like rich, almost like sweet, but yet like pungent kind of wood note. And again, it's coming across as a bourbon that's got more age. So you're definitely picking up a little bit more of that barrel influence, the barrel char, but again, a little hint of a cedar note on that as well. So let's go ahead and see how this bad boy is gonna taste. But before we do, we've gotta pay some bills around here. So let's hear from today's video sponsor. So today we're talking whiskey glasses. When only the best is what you demand, Uniwhisk has you covered. Who wants ordinary when you can have something that's extraordinary? Each one of these whiskey glasses is hand cut and crafted using only the finest lead-free crystal glass. These glasses come in several different designs. These two glasses here happen to be the Supernova and the Gravity. They come both packaged in single individual glasses, or you can select the set to have these shipped. Make sure you use the code JOURNEY10 at checkout. That's gonna save you an additional 10% off your entire order. I have to say a big thank you to Uniwhisk for sponsoring today's video. Cheers. So very interesting. So immediately my first impression is liquid pecan pie. Absolutely fantastic oak, sweet, rich. Again, think rickhouse, those intense aromas that are now just translating over to the palate. Beautiful oak on this. Again, those beautiful like brown sugars, molasses, but I'm still getting those hints of a really intense, almost like rum-like influence. And for me, that's beautiful on a whiskey where you're getting something that is not finished, but still picking something up that has a little bit of that kind of feel to it. I absolutely love this one. So it's very rich, decadent, complex, all of those. Everything that you'd kind of expect from a stag. This just somehow feels a little bit more like refined to me. You're not so focused on it being as one or two dimensional from the standpoint of just picking out a couple of different things or focusing heavy on the heat. This has a lot more going on. It just feels like a more well-rounded bourbon. Yeah, maybe even that rum is coming from like a, you know, if you've ever chewed on a piece of sugar cane or something, that sugar note, the burnt brown sugars, there's again something that's very rummy about it. Lots of dark fruit on this. Now for me, secondary then from the nose, more of the dark fruits, a little bit more of that cherry chocolate that's starting to kind of come through. But for me, very much more dominated by the heavy brown sugars, a little more of that kind of that rum influence that it has on it. Nice, sweet, rich, like rickhouse kind of oak. And again, it's drinking like an older type of whiskey for me. If we focus on the fruit aspect, again, that cherry is oftentimes something that's very much in the forefront with Stagg, and it's there. But for me, this is almost to the point where, like I mentioned several times, the rum influence, and that may also be coming from that kind of fruit note where it's starting to almost like ferment. So you get a little bit more of that alcohol, in addition to some of that sweetness that you're getting from that fruit that's starting to kind of ferment. Oftentimes you'll get those sugars. And again, this is probably turning into a little bit more of those brown sugars, things along those lines, molasses, that kind of stuff. Very rich, very intense, very decadent. One of the probably better Stagg pours that I've had in some time. Little more of the leather, again, more of the tobacco, really more of, when I'm kind of thinking the tobacco, this feels more like a cherry, like kind of pipe tobacco. That's kind of what's in my mind right now because of the cherry, the leather, kind of the combo of the tobacco that's there. But it's feeling more like a kind of cherry pipe tobacco for me. There's maybe on the finish part of it a slight dryness. Again, you're going to get some of that at times with some of that intense oak. You'll get a little bit of that kind of overlap where you're not only getting some of the oak, but some of the dryness that kind of comes along. Sometimes people will refer to that as, you know, a little bit of a leather aspect. That's definitely there. This would be probably, from a leather standpoint, more of like an old saddle, you know, saddlebag leather, something along those lines. Feels a little bit like richer, more leather, not like a fresh leather, a little bit more of that kind of dustiness that's there. Old oak, something along those lines. For me, overall, I would say this is probably one of the better Staggs that I've had in some time. And what I mean by that is it feels more put together. It feels more, you know, cohesive. A lot of all of those flavors that I've been getting both on the nose and the palate all seem to just work really well together. And oftentimes you don't get that, where you're getting more individual or focusing on one or two kind of notes with some of the Stagg releases. This one doesn't. This just feels like a very well-aged bourbon or a very well-aged Stagg that has all of those components that you really look for, in this bottle. If this is something that you can find, I'll say at retail, it's definitely a buy. I think really no matter what it is, if you can find it at retail, it's a buy no matter what. In terms of secondary, this is always a little bit difficult for me. I don't know if I'd go much above that $200, maybe $250 price point. It's very, very good. It's just one of those things where I'm not a huge secondary person for the most part. And when you get into value from that standpoint, again, that's just getting into what it is that you're ultimately willing to pay for a bottle that you're really on the hunt for. So again, if I was going to buy it at secondary, I think this is probably a bottle that's in that between $200, $250 range. I wouldn't have an issue paying that kind of price for, I think, what it is that you're getting. So with that, guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. Greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to follow me, you can on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those places at My Bourbon Journey. If you'd like to help support the channel and become part of the Mash and Journey Whiskey Club, make sure you check out the Patreon link in the description below, along with a lot of other great links down there for you as well. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, it's about the journey and not the destination. Cheers.
One step, keeping pace, taking our time. Girl, I wouldn't trade it all for the world. With you, I get high. With you, I'm alive. With you, I'm away. How do we find love in a hidden place? Let's just escape.